Boom.
This is Robert Hutter, and you're watching the Break It Down Show.
Yeah, this is great. There's a little weird sound going on, but oh, there it goes. Okay, it's gone. Hey, I appreciate you coming on the show. You've been on a bunch of times, and I was thinking back when you met Rich and I at that conference, and we were talking about the power of religion and government, and how we tend to agree disagree, ignore as a nation the importance of religion. And so, I guess I want to throw a premise at you. We have a lot of things that are religion like in our politics. One of them, for sure, is Donald Trump. And it's not a statement against him, it's just a statement of fact. There's people that no matter what he does, it's sacrosanct, right? And then there's people from both parties that have things that they have dogmas for. At least it appears that way. What are your thoughts? Is that unfair to characterize some of the current political movements and groups as being sects of a religion?
That's a toughie, isn't it? Uh,
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I want to be fair to the President of the United States.
Fair enough.
Certainly, there's enough of chattering at the chattering classes that I'm not so sure I can add very much to it, though I'm going
Yeah.
to. Uh, I'm not sure that he really cares about very much except what happens to move him at a particular moment or his particular perspective on the world. Whether he has an image of heaven and hell, whether he has an image of religion, whether he has, since I guess he's nominally a Christian, after all, he took a Bible outside the church across the White House about 4 years ago and held it upside down. Uh, I think he didn't. And the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, who was there in uniform, who complained about it afterwards, is now being done in. He's retired, done in by Trump and his minions. But I guess what I'm getting at is that he may have somewhere in the depths of his soul a concern about humanity and about the teachings of the leader of the church he nominally at least belongs to, Jesus Christ. And there are a lot of other leaders of religions and lots of other prophets who have also said various important things. How much they motivate Mr. Trump, I really have no idea.
Yeah.
Now, he did say, it was either in the inaugural or soon thereafter, he thought with the assassination attempt in Pennsylvania during the campaign that he said, God protected me because of what I had to do. Well, maybe he believes it. Whether it's true or not, I'm not going to get into that because
Yeah.
uh, my relationship with God tends to be one way. Uh, I assume he's listening, but he doesn't speak to me very often.
Yeah. There is something to be said for when you are saved from something. It is easy to see God in that. I think about like Cabeza de Vaca when he first gets here to the North American continent, and he walks around and he somehow survives. And I don't know how much you know his story, but it's ridiculous. And if you survived 10 years from all the things he did with nothing, you would have to believe, especially in the 1500s, like that was divine. So I don't blame people for finding God in things when they go through a significant crisis. People often find God in prison, and it sticks. It works for them. So I don't blame that. I guess I was more talking about people who fall into these, I don't know, catechisms that aren't religiousness on the surface, right? But like you must believe the science or all these other sayings that we have now where we talk about gender and all these other conversations that get really far from what we would all say is like, this is actually like in the middle here is where the normal stuff is. And then you're asking us to get all the way out here, which you can't even see because we're now looking at things that are 1 in 10,000, 1 in 100,000, and saying that they're relevant to day-to-day life. And if you don't comply, you will be punished, And so it becomes kind of a inquisition like sometimes. And again, like this, it's not one party or the other. It just seems that there are these beliefs that you must perform that you are doing and saying things. And that to me seems like it's very focused in like like when people talk to, I give it up to the universe. So just say the word God. I give it up to God, right? I'm praying to the universe to provide for me. Well, then just say God, right? But we don't want to say God. because that's not the religion they want.
Well, I believe in God for a variety of reasons. One of which, just to be functional about it, what came before the Big Bang? Had to be
Mm,
something. And the
gotta
only
be
answer
something.
that makes any sense is God. I guess over the years, I've become less enamored of the dictates of formal religions. Some of these dictates were evolved in order to get people to be faithful to a religion. Some were for social reasons, political reasons, etc. I guess maybe I come closest to what Thomas Jefferson once said, that he was a theist, believing
Hmm.
in God, but not in terms of the structures of religions, many of which get deeply in the way,
Yeah.
but also which give people a sense of being. And one of the things that attracts me, and always has, and certainly more so now to Christianity, is that if you look at the four Gospels, plus a lot of the teachings that came afterwards, but not the book of Revelation, which was written by somebody in the first sentence who was up on whatever the equivalent of alcohol was then, which is just very anti-Christian, is it's a way of living life. It's a
Yeah.
way of having attitudes towards your society, towards other people, towards your family, et cetera, et cetera. Nobody, I guess, ever lives a truly Christian life. It is probably impossible to do it. One of the items that is in the Gospels, which is extremely difficult, is that the one line which kind of gets just about everybody that who's got any money laid by. It's easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle uh, than for rich men to enter the kingdom of heaven. Of course,
Right.
then you get into a definition of camel, definition of eye of a needle. It says something very real. And to the extent that people will live better lives because this group of teachings is out there, and it's not just Christianity; it's also Judaism. It's also all the Abrahamic religions that were actually mostly invented by Zoroaster. You can find just about everything in the Abrahamic religions that came from Zoroaster and other religions too. It's
Yeah.
the things that lead people to live better lives. That's what
Yeah.
really matters to me. And here is where I find it so difficult in terms of what's being done now by Mr. Trump that he has led us in different directions. Oh, let me try to answer a different part of your question. Um, I think there were two great inventions that we have suffered from. One was the internal combustion engine, which is going to end the world, and the other is social media. That social media will take a tiny little event anywhere and blow it up into a universal proportion, then get picked up by the mainstream media. Whereas I would say things like that you mentioned, LGBTQ, gender issues, all of this, I say, let's get beyond it. That's
Yeah.
about people. That's about how they live their lives.
Right.
99% of the people in this country are never affected by any of this. It's not going to bother them if somebody goes off and has a partner of a different sex and married to it. Who's going to bother with that? I guess I'll say one good thing about Trump at this point. Here's my dog deciding he wants his dinner, but maybe he'll disappear. Maybe he'll disappear. Is the one thing that Trump did, which to say that transgender women, that is, who started out of men, really shouldn't be allowed to compete in uh, women's sports, where things that relate to capacity to deal with the weight and all that kind of stuff. I agree with that. I mean, that is really one of the things. I don't know what your education was, but one of the things I was taught early on is that a lot of political life and social life is a matter of balancing contending interests. And you have to
Right.
balance out what's important and what isn't. In fact, politics is essentially about and in democracy and other methods as well, but let's say democracy, is how do you take contending interests and work out something that works for society as a whole? Um, it's about bargaining. It's about interchange. It's about discussion. It's about majority may be in charge, but one of the factors of the majority, and if I required anybody to read anything, it'd be the Federalist Papers, is
Oh,
the majority has a responsibility to protect the rights of the minorities, whoever it is. And we have gotten astray with that. Some of it is, quote, the excessives of what was called woke. I don't want to get into that. But on the other hand, it's the excessives of a lot of people who would support Trump and sort of Trump ideas, which would deny the opportunities for people to live lives different from the way in which these people live lives. I apologize for my dog. I don't know what we can do
yeah.
about that. He's a Cocker Spaniel. Delight. He's 14 years old, but he's decided he wants his dinner, which is sitting outside the Protesco. Can I
Do you
take,
want to go feed him and I can cover a minute or two while you're talking, while you're feeding, or what
well,
do you
let me
think's the
just push
best
him
thing?
out the door. You just talk for a
Okay.
minute, okay?
I'll talk for a minute. Hey, everybody, this is Pete from the Break It Down Show. You can always go to breakitdownshow.com. There's a little PayPal link there. You can mash that button and you can invent your own subscription. Call me on the phone, take me out to dinner, whatever it is, whatever you guys want. And you can also go to the YouTube page. There's probably some subscription buttons there that you can push. All that money is very helpful to us here. And we, look, I work pretty hard at this stuff, working on some other projects, and you can probably see that because we're publishing quite often, 2 shows in the last 3 hours, and that's what we do around here. And we've got Dr. Robert Hunter sitting in with us, and how incredible is that? I wanted to ask you,
Well, first, let me say,
please.
I'm a dog person. I
Yeah,
can empathize with cat people, but I'm not a cat person. And here's one thing, since sometimes after your programs, people rush to the internet to look at things. One thing I recommend is a poem by Rudyard Kipling called The Power of the Dog. I recommend everybody look at that. And if you don't tear up over that, then you're not a human being. Sorry. Now, where are
I
we?
love it. Well, so you're wrapping up your thoughts on, uh, we use gender ideology as a thing, and what's important in the Federalist Papers and Jefferson. And I guess the thing I would say is quite often we talk about the they ought to do this, right? And so we have the government be the they. And if I don't want to be involved in LGBTQAI plus, whatever the name is, um, then someone has to do it. And does that mean money comes out of my pocket? Do I want girls and boys playing sports together, when they're bigger? Probably not. But I think there's a reasonable middle ground where we can all say everybody's entitled to love. Everybody's been entitled to be seen. But don't make your internal kids struggle my struggle. I can empathize with your problem. We all have our own individual family problems. No one wants anybody else's problems. How do we get out of each other's way while still allowing people to be loved, to be seen, to be cared for? And that's easier said than done.
Couldn't agree more. In
Yeah.
fact, that is one of the key matters we have to sort through in our democracy is
Mm,
how do you separate things that matter to me that I worry about and things that don't matter to me but matter to somebody else, which are none of my damn business.
right.
I have long ago said, why do we take a lot of these issues, get them done, and then move on? Move on to
Yeah.
something else. We still haven't come to terms adequately with what was done to blacks through all those years of slavery. As Lincoln said in one of his speeches, it took 350 years to create this question. Maybe it'll take us 350 years to get beyond it. And
Fair.
I agree the role of Hispanics in society. I mean, the role of women in society. I mean, we're still, here we are 105 years after
Yeah.
women formally got the vote, except in places like Wisconsin, where it happened in the 1880s. And we're still worrying about will women get equal pay for equal work? etc. I mean, that's ludicrous, ludicrous.
Yeah.
So many people in a country which still has rising incomes, rising opportunities, are still worried if Charlie over there gets a little bit of something or other, that's going to be taken away from me. It's
Mm,
ludicrous. I worry more about AI taking away people's jobs than somebody who's black or Hispanic or
sure.
even legal immigrants. Now, we do have to get control over the issue of illegal immigration, but let's understand it, that if we were to take all the undocumented immigrants, every one of them, and push them out of the country, the cost in the grocery store to you and me would skyrocket.
Sure.
The healthcare system would collapse. A whole series of things would collapse. So there needs to be a rule of reason in that particular thing. And unfortunately, this has been a failure of both Democrats and Republicans. I remember many, many years ago, would be back in the 1980s, in a little confab with some people, and one of the people in it was Senator Ted Kennedy. And he said something on which was very important. He said, you know, we are going to have to do something about Mexican unemployment. We're either going to have to settle it in Mexico or we're going to have to deal with it here.
Mm,
I can't believe that people would rather pick up stakes and move to a foreign country, lose their friends, lose their associates, and that sort of thing, unless they had compelling reasons. Now, maybe some of them are economic migrants. You'll do better in the United States. Some of
right.
it has to do with crime. Some of it has to do with gross failures of the United States as we worry about some things happening in foreign policy in the Eastern Hemisphere that may not matter that much to us here, but have been a failure in the Western Hemisphere. James Reston of the New York Times used to say, we would do anything for Latin America except read about it. I mean, it's a big failure of the
Yeah.
United States, big failure of the
Yeah.
United States. And we are, some generations from now, assuming we survive both AI and climate change, and
Okay.
I'm not sure about climate change, it may already be too late, another subject. Uh, and if there is some people extant and they're going to look back and they say, here was a place called the United States of America, the richest country in all history,
Yeah.
had a chance to deal with the problems of the people within its borders, even before you get to problems of peoples without our borders. And that gets
Yeah.
us, of course, into US AID and all of that nonsense. And the United States failed,
Yeah.
failed. The idea that I can walk down the streets here in Washington, D.C., and see panhandlers or people pitching tents because they have no place to live, that's ludicrous.
Yeah.
When you have, and I'll personalize it for a minute, the richest man in the world is out there making matters worse. And maybe Trump does, in his heart, have concern for people who are less well off. Elon Musk doesn't at all. If you look at the stuff he's doing, the man who is president of the United States is Elon Musk. The
Mm,
assistant president is uh, is a man named Donald Trump. He's not in
yeah.
charge. I mean, I just can't believe it. What's going on? Uh, well, anyway,
It's
I'll stop there. But
well, let me ask you
we are
this. So
missing an opportunity. And this is not a Republican thing. It's not a Democratic thing. It's an
yeah,
American thing to deal with our society as we have the
yeah,
capacity to do it
right.
whenever we want to.
I can wrap my head around. So first off, I can say the words, "I'm not really a fan of Donald Trump," right? And then if I say anything that's positive, all of a sudden someone decides that I love Donald Trump. I don't. He has earned a lot of our scorn and disdain. We've seen him for almost 80 years, do the things that he does, and he has a history of doing things. And so I see him swimming as fast as he can, and I'm like, he is making mistakes. Like these things might seem just as I'm hard on other organizations when they do things that brief well but have no results. I'm looking and he's writing these EOs. Well, if you write an EO and you don't have some following legislation, if you don't provision some of these things. Like it's great for Homan to go out and find all these criminals, round them up, and eject them out of the country. Well, all right, we can all kind of agree on that. But you're also making people wonder if they're in danger, even if they're not illegal. How do I prove I'm a citizen? I've got a license. Does that mean anything? And that's not how I want my neighbors in America to feel. And so we've got to fix the thing that it shouldn't take 15 years to become a citizen. We shouldn't have all these Afghans and Iraqi interpreters who worked with us and really endangered their lives forever as long as they were in Iraq or Afghanistan. It shouldn't be impossible for them to get over here if someone can just walk across the border and be like, we don't care. These things are all not congruent. So how do we have a permissive immigration policy that's provisioned by Congress so we can say, here's how you come in. The line is short, come in and inculcate yourself. And sure, it takes some time. It'll take a generation or two before everybody's normal, but we don't have that right now. We have this chaotic system that allows other countries to send us their trash, and we don't need that. And there's for sure nefarious actors sending things. And there's also wonderful people who are like, and these are, I always say this, Robert, I always say my favorite American is the next one. Like they come here to join our crew, to be part of oh my God, come on. How can I help you? Right? Like I want to be that person. But we don't have a policy that wraps all that up and says, here is a sane way to harm as few as people as possible. Because what we've had the last 4 years was an absolute mess of inhumanity by trying to be humane. And we often do this where we create a sanctuary city. I mean, you got people in San Francisco walking around with their needles in their arms and laying on the concrete. Like, that's not humane. Like, we're not doing a good job of being humane, even though it briefs like we are. So I just don't know. Is it even possible to have an effective immigration system that deals with what Ted Kennedy talked to? Ted Kennedy's been dead over 20 years, I think now. He's been dead a long time. And we still haven't dealt with these problems.
Of course. The ideas are all out there. They've been out there for years. Interestingly, somebody like John McCain, who I didn't particularly care for, but he was in favor of an honest immigration program because he came from a state which relied upon people who coming from other countries, a lot legal, a lot illegal, in order to have the people of his state thrive, to have them thrive. The ideas are out there. The problem is it's been so highly politicized, number one, exploited, number two, and a gross failure of leadership. I can't resist a comment right now. Mark Twain once said, we're the only country in the world that doesn't have a native criminal class, except the Congress. And that was 150 years ago. I mean, I look at television and I hear these people trying to justify what Trump is doing with regard to Gaza, which interestingly enough, an awful lot of Republicans are saying, what the hell are you on to about that? And a lot of people are trying to walk it back. It's damaging to Israel, damaging to us, and damaging to Palestinians, of course. And it's just where he got that from, that's another matter. But let's go back. The immigration thing. You can do it with the ideas that are there and have been there for a long time, which is to make increased access to people legally coming into the country, short amount of time, reasonably short of time to become an American citizen. Incidentally, and I'm now going to get in trouble with all my liberal friends, I think one thing you should have to do to become a citizen is learn to speak the English language. Bill Richardson, you may remember him. He was from New Mexico. He was Secretary of Energy, ran for president at one point, who was half Irish and half Mexican. And he said, the problem is getting these people in here and then get them into the mainstream economy, which means speaking English. He said the first generation has a problem, but all their children playing on the streets, they can all speak English. And your time is going to take care of it. So maybe you have to draw a line under where we are now and move on. But unfortunately, I mean, the idea of taking people and putting them in Guantanamo Bay, come on, come give me a break. Guantanamo Bay has earned a reputation as a place where torture took place, and we should have given it back to Cuba a long time ago. What the hell? That's another matter. But what I'm saying is, it's not for want of ideas. It's not for want of good people,
Hmm.
Republicans,
Yeah.
Democrats, independents, people who don't pay attention to politics at all, knowing how to do these things, committing to get it. It's the functional failure of our political system. And it's in all four branches of government, with the exception
Yeah.
of the Break It Down show. It's
That's right.
Congress, it's administrations, it's the Supreme Court, which, sidebar, I think some of the things that Trump is doing are already becoming too much for some of his appointees to bear.
Mm.
Remember what happened when you're too young, I'm too young. When Roosevelt tried to pack the courts in 1937, got slapped down, had to back off, but the Supreme Court then began allowing large elements of the New Deal get through. So maybe the Supreme Court will get there. The element of the fourth branch, four branches, is the media. That I
Mhm.
much worry about. You know, there are a lot of issues that cannot be talked about seriously in the mainstream media. And it requires out of the way place. I don't know what your viewership is, but it's nothing compared to any of the mainstream media. More's the pity. I could
Yeah.
name half a dozen other places which do this. But issues, I'll just take one, which is here we go. This is the third rail of all third rail issues, the Middle East. You cannot, in the mainstream media, have an honest debate about the Middle East. It is career destroying.
Mm.
You just can't do it. You have to go into the out of the way places to have an honest debate about this. Well, that's one reason we're in such trouble. One of the things that Trump did with his thing the other day about Gaza, I don't even know why he did it, is one thing it has done, which we Americans need to face up to. We were at a point where we were beginning to start disengaging from the depth of our commitment in the Middle East, reducing our commitment, focus more on China, whether we get it right or not is another matter, focus on trying to get the war stopped in Ukraine and build a decent security system in Ukraine. But what Trump did was pin the United States for the indefinite future to being deeply engaged in the politics of the Middle East more than we have been for years and years and years. Now, everybody's trying to walk it back now, but the fact is he said it. And he's interestingly, he's been condemned by virtually all of our friends in the world, as well as all of our foes in the world. It's something that Russia and China and Iran and their West European allies have said all agree upon that what he proposed for Gaza is bad geopolitics. It is also desperately inhumane.
Mm.
And a lot of other things. And it began under Biden. Biden was unwilling to do the things that were necessary to bring the war to a halt. He just refused to do it.
Yeah.
You can't say that because you get pounded on if you say it. But on that issue, Trump is no worse than Biden was. And but that's another matter. You won't find that in the mainstream media because it
Yeah.
just doesn't appear there. Doesn't appear.
Yeah.
The
Well,
media.
this is why the fourth branch is under siege right now, because they struggle with truth. They struggle with integrity, and I remember this is in the 90s,
Wait a
in the
second.
60s. Yeah.
Mainstream media, most of it is not concerned with truth. They're concerned with ratings.
Right.
As the head of
Yeah.
CBS once said, if it bleeds, it leads.
Yes.
Very
Yes.
few people out there in the mainstream media who I believe, in the issues I know a lot about, were prepared to tell the truth.
That's right.
Break it
Yeah.
down.
And that's compromised their position. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
it's, you know,
We try to be straightforward because we have competing.
it's just the fourth branch of government has failed the American people.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like on our show, I'll have competing points of view, because it's important to understand two very smart people talking about something they know a lot about, and they don't agree, because that's the essence of what we have to sort out. Like, what direction are we going to go in? These two very smart people are saying this. Well, how do we bring them together so at least our hands are together, whatever it is, right? And and the fourth branch has failed us with that. And when you see these over and over again, it's like I don't trust you guys anymore. They've compromised their integrity to the point where there is no integrity. I don't know how you build it back. And here's the thing, and I think we've discussed this offline, is the platforms that are non-traditional now, not the Break It Down show, unfortunately, but a lot of them, they get 100 million views on things. It's amazing. A lot of huge, big Super Bowl sized ratings reliably. And I guess what I would say to that is, like, so Joe Rogan has an influence on the election because Donald Trump goes on the show. Kamala Harris wouldn't go on the show. And there's a big jump there. You got to see Donald Trump speak what appeared to be unframed, unedited, and just open. And people resonated with that. And when he stands up there, Donald Trump, and he wins an election, he can, like all politicians do, he can claim a mandate and say, you guys have said, go out and fix immigration. You guys have said, get men out of women's sports. You guys have said this. And he starts writing these EOs. You have to be fair and say, he's doing what he was hired to do, right? He gets all the consequences too, but that's where we ended up because of all of these different messes. And now we're seeing USAID, and I'm no fan of USAID. They have forsaken what their role was, it appears, when you get into the books. And we should be not mad about them. We should be mad that we didn't do this accounting 25 years ago, 20 years ago, 15 years ago. Why have we allowed this organization to not be checked up by Congress and avoid all of these other checks and balances? So that's a lot, but I don't know. We have to deal with the fact that a lot of people said, and the lady who was running on democracy was anointed. She didn't go through the process. And so people were rejecting that too. There's a lot of things. We've had a lot of elections, Robert. It seems like where, for the most part, we're voting against someone as opposed to for someone. I don't know how long we can handle that.
You got to build for the future. If Donald Trump really believes that the greatest period in American history is going to be in the future, there's some things that he can start doing right away.
Let's hear it.
And number one is to get rid of the president. The 25th Amendment is a way of getting rid of a president who's misbehaved. But if you read the 25th Amendment, there's no way it could apply to Trump because it requires a majority of cabinet members to start the process. Now, I'm being a little bit cute there. The president of the United States we need to get rid of is Elon Musk. He's running the show. And some of the things that he is doing and is standing behind are just extraordinary. Incidentally, one little fact check. People worry about USAID and all the giveaway we do for all these countries, forgetting, of course, that what aid does keeps Ebola from our shores. It does an awful lot to help countries develop. So in large parts of the world, they don't want to come here, all right, or they don't come here. And everybody says, well, 10% of the federal budget goes to USAID. It's well under 1%.
Yeah,
It's lost in the rounding. But it doesn't have a constituency. Back in the 1970s, I spent 3.5 years working in an institution that dealt with development. I learned an awful lot then, traveled an awful lot, saw an awful lot of what was being done. And it's something that is very positive for the people of the United States. In addition, that's hard-headed realism, in addition to any moral questions that relate to who we are and believe we are and want to be as a people. We were uniquely created on an idea, uniquely. The only other country that came close, let's say, was Israel, because of its historical connections. But we were created an idea. And if we allow ourselves to back away from that, everybody's going to suffer, including the children and grandchildren of the people who are running things today. They're going to say, how did we let this happen? Well, it's
Yeah.
we, the people, in order to form a more perfect union. And it has to be done in every generation. And the current generation is failing.
Yeah, tranquility. When's that coming? We
Well,
don't have that.
nobody wants tranquility. Uh, Politics is about combat.
Yeah.
It's about the clashing of different ideas, but then with an overarching belief, you got to make things work.
Yeah.
Things have to work.
Yeah.
You have to give a little. I have to give a little. There might be some way of compromise. One thing that has changed in the United States Congress, I was fortunate to work for Kennedy for 3.5 years back in the 1970. And when it came to issues he really cared about, like health, who did he work with most closely? Orrin Hatch, right-wing Republican of Utah.
Right. Right.
They had a bromance. They made it work. And one thing Kennedy taught us on the staff is never make an enemy, never personalize. But nowadays, you have people on the two sides of the aisle who don't even talk with one another.
Yeah.
I heard from a senior staff person to a member of the Democratic side of the Senate, and who was talking about his senator going and talking to somebody on the Republican side. And the response from some other Republicans and there was, why are you doing that? We're not supposed to talk to the Democrats. Well, what the hell are you doing in the Congress if you're not there to fulfill the promise and the requirements of the founders? The founders were pretty smart. The Federalist Papers are based on human nature. And human nature, in order to function, requires people working together to reach decisions, otherwise you have stasis and nothing works, and the nation loses, as we're losing today.
Let me ask you this. This is not easy, but when you get elected, you're the boss. It's your policies, and there's going to be you are the boss. Like, you're the person who has the mission. You've got the responsibility. You get all of the everything good, everything bad comes at you, right? When you look at Israel, or when Donald Trump looks at Israel and says two-state solution, neither side wants that repeatedly. All right, what else can we do? If he does say, hey, why don't we build, and this guy's a builder, right? Why don't we build them homes and a community in Jordan or in Egypt or somewhere else, and then just take this piece of land and rebuild it in the meantime and make it something that it should be instead of what it has been, and take that as his shot at peace. I don't know if that will work. I don't know if anything will work, but I don't blame him for saying we're not going to go down the two-state road. We're not going to go down the Israel dominance road. We're going to go down this different road, because we've tried a lot of things and they haven't held, right? The last thing we need is to wait 5 years from now and find out Hamas is back and some other force, or Iran is continuing to fund whatever. We don't want that. So is it a bad thing to try something else when everything before has resulted in where we are today?
Okay, you live in California, right?
I do. It's wonderful.
Whereabouts?
Orange County.
Orange County. Okay, well, I won't get into that. You and John Wayne Airport. Okay, here's the thing. You've just had this terrible problem of fires up in Los Angeles. How about if we take everybody who lives in Los Angeles and move them to some other country, bring in the bulldozers, bulldoze all the problems that were there, and rebuild it into Disneyland West or whatever it was, and then maybe they can come back again from wherever they sent. What would be the reaction in California to that?
Yeah, it wouldn't be good anywhere. I don't think it is
There
a
you
good
go.
thing.
Well,
But I
even
would say this:
the
there's
Palestinians,
nobody in the Palisades started a genocide 2 years ago. So there is that
sorry,
problem, right?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the word.
The people in the Palisades didn't start a genocide. They didn't invade a country, and they aren't a terrorist group. And so, there's a little bit of a difference there. We have this group that won't accept a country. How many times has Palestine stood on the edge with a pen ready for them to sign, and they walk away from that agreement? So there is a challenge there that's different than the Palisades. I don't want them to have to leave that place, but I also don't want them to get funded to build another terrorist machine. Nobody wants that. So
Well,
yeah. So what do we do?
how much time do we have? I've been working on these issues. I'm going to date myself from the first day of the Six-Day War in 1967,
Yeah.
along with a leading person from Oxford University. We wrote the first study on the Six-Day War, which still stands up. And I've been involved in this ever since. I'm a firm believer of the Israeli state, a homeland for Jews.
Mm-hmm.
I am a Zionist with a small z, if you can, but recognizing both parts, or there are three parts. We go back to I'm going to give you a little potted history. Balfour Declaration, 2nd of November, 1917, which everybody knows said, I'm going to paraphrase a little bit. Her Majesty's government looks with favor upon the establishment of a Jewish homeland in Palestine. Okay? It's only one sentence, the whole Balfour Declaration. Being understood that nothing should be done to compromise the rights of the indigenous populations who are already there. Okay? Same sentence, never done. Third part, of course, is we need to do things to take care of the rights of Jews in Europe. And the failure to do that, we all know what happened with the Holocaust. People forget about that second sentence. If one were to go through the history of all the things that were done in regard to peacemaking, in which I was deeply engaged as the senior person on the NSC staff for 2 years under Jimmy Carter, after the signing of the peace treaty, through autonomy and all, on a day-to-day basis, all right? I did it for 2 years. For which I was thanked by senior people who worked in Israel. My standing in favor of Israeli rights is unimpeachable.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm one of the very few people who is in good odor with Arabs and Israelis.
Mm-hmm.
I can document it. I have sitting behind me a very nice personally inscribed letter of me and Menachem Begin, personally inscribed to me, saying all kinds of nice things, if you'd like to see it. Okay, there's an awful lot what you already said about the Palestinians walk away from it, which is based on a big lie.
Oh, okay.
Okay, at the Clinton Camp David meeting, there was only one person on the United States side who understood the issues who was allowed into that meeting.
Mm-hmm.
And he wrote afterwards that the idea that the Israelis, Barak made this offer and then Yasser Arafat walked away, just wasn't true. And he has become a pariah. And at one point, he made a mistake as to who he was talking about. He had his security clearance taken away. He was thrown out of the government, and because he has said something that went against the big lie. I can document all this now. One thing that is going to happen is that no other country is going to take a significant number of Palestinians. Jordan's not going to do it, which has been an ambition of some Israelis for a long time. The Egyptians are not going to do it. The last thing they want is a bunch of revanchists living in their country. They're not going to do it. Not going to do it. In fact, I remember when I was doing these negotiations, we had a meeting in the State Department of the Egyptian head, who was prime minister, the chief negotiator for Israel, who was a man named Moshe Dayan. Okay. And we were having a coffee break. There were about 7 or 8 of us in the room. And Diane said to the Egyptian prime minister, "We would like to give Gaza back to Egypt." Okay? Stunning. The Egyptian prime minister said, "Oh, no, no, no. You stole it. We don't want it. It's your
We don't
problem.
want it.
You take care of it. It's your problem."
Yeah.
Well, I
Yeah.
mean, that was an amazing moment. You won't see that anywhere because it's never been put in public. But I was standing there when it happened. Okay.
Yeah.
So here is the thing. You've got 700,000 Israelis living in the West Bank in illegal settlements. Okay. Well, if you were going to be really quixotic about it and really wanted to be make a funny, which of course would get you in trouble. Well, you could always take Palestinians and put them in the places where these illegal settlements are in the West Bank. Well, having said that, I know there's going to be a huge blowback on that, and I just said it as a joke. But you cannot take a people who are in their homeland, which has been destroyed by somebody else, way beyond where you are. Incidentally, here's another thing for somebody to look up to right away. You may remember a comic strip, so-called comic strip, that was done about 15 years ago called Mouse, Maus. You may remember it.
No, I don't.
It's a serial comic strip, and Mouse is a mouse, Mouse, but he is a stand-in for Jews who were slaughtered by the Nazis in the Holocaust. Okay, in the New York Review of Books, which just arrived in my mailbox today, the two cartoonists for Mouse have a 3-page set of cartoons in which they are talking about what Israel has done to the Palestinians. The fact it was the New York Review of Books is stunning. The fact that these two people were prepared to do this, look it up. I was stunned when I saw it. The basic thing is there has to be some place within these territories for Palestinians to live, and to remove them to a place that does not exist, even temporarily. And of course, Trump's original idea was, God, this would be amazing. This would be the Riviera on the Mediterranean. You just wonder, have they reintroduced cannabis to the White House? I don't know what's going on. It's not going to happen. And it's striking that a number of Republicans in the Congress are now pushing back on it because they understand that this means the United States will not find a way to reduce its engagement. They know it's likely to lead to the United States having to send troops, no matter what Trump is saying. They know there's going to be a huge bill imposed on the United States, even if some of the Arab states put up some money. And of course, as we know, none of the Arab states give a damn for the Palestinians. Give a damn for them. One of the problems with the Palestinians, and I'm going to give you a statement, then I'm going to explain it. They are the Jews of the Arab world, meaning they're the most talented Arabs. They were the ones who built what went on in the Persian Gulf. They were the ones who were the architects, the doctors, the lawyers, highly educated people, until they got crushed by a combination of what Hamas did and what Netanyahu did to help keep Hamas in power. How do I know? Because he said so publicly. Why? Because he didn't want Fatah in the West Bank to have a chance to do anything serious. And he also wanted to demonstrate that Palestinians could not run their own society. So if you can make it fail in Hamas in Gaza, you can reduce the pressure in the West Bank. I didn't say that. Netanyahu said it. I just happened to read the internet. Okay, so that is a non-starter, and it's maybe it's going to wake people up. But one thing that has not so far happened, except occasionally, is a serious discussion in the mainstream media. And
Mm.
serious elements of what needs to be done. Because, like it or not, we Americans are on the hook. Now, then there's another thing which is goes along with it, which is the issue of the Iranian bomb, or whether they'll get the bomb, which some people are now talking this would be an existential threat to Israel. The fact of the matter is that in 2015, Barack Obama negotiated a thing called the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, under which we would remove sanctions and the Iranians would stop enrichment. And the Iranians abided by it. They put 95% of their enriching uranium and sold it to other people, mostly the Russians. They poured concrete in their plutonium reactor, and it was working until Trump came in and killed it for a number of reasons. One, it was done by Obama. He may have some secret idea. Another thing, it was bad politics in the United States because Netanyahu had opposed the JCPOA from beginning to end. It's all on
Mm.
the public record. I'm not making any of this up. It's just all there. It takes you about 3 minutes on the internet to find all this stuff. Biden comes in, and he could instantly have rejoined the JCPOA. But because of American domestic politics, he was scared to do it. And in fact, Biden gave everything possible to the Israelis, except on one occasion, briefly, he paused the provision of certain kind of weapons. But you may not have noticed that one of the last acts that Biden did was to reopen the supply to Israel for uses in Gaza, of course, if the ceasefire breaks down, which has every chance it will do. 1,800 United States 2,000-pound bombs. That was one of the last acts of what Biden did. Have you read about this? Probably not. Look on the internet.
No.
Well, fact. Okay. And one of the great ironies is that here the Israelis are bitching and moaning about Iran maybe getting the bomb, where they did as much as anybody to kill the opportunity to stop them from having the bomb. It began in 2003, where the Iranians were scared to death after we went into Iraq and made an offer to resolve these problems. And it's authenticated. It was authenticated that this was done. The National Security Advisor at the time didn't even show it to the president. Okay. And the United States never responded to it, never did, because it was bad politics. Okay. So here you now have Netanyahu saying, I'm very much worried about Iran getting to the point of having a bomb, 3 weeks away from having enough material to start fashioning a crude weapon. It's been 3 weeks now for 20 years. Now you wonder, what don't people pay attention? Don't people have calendars? No, I don't want Iran to get the bomb. We're never going to let them get the bomb. There's no question. We're not going to let it happen. We're not going to let it happen. But Netanyahu, as much as anybody, fueled the fires of Iran being pushed in the direction of getting the bomb. Now, if I were an Iranian and sensible, I would say, wait a second, I gave up the chance to get the bomb. I know somebody else who gave up the chance to get the bomb, and that was a man named Gaddafi. Look what happened to him. I know somebody else who went ahead and got the bomb, which is Kim Jong-un in North Korea. And we now have mutual assured destruction with North Korea. We don't dare touch them. If I wouldn't have done this, but a serious strategic analyst would have said to the Iranians, for God's sakes, get the bomb as fast as you can. It's the only way to keep from being attacked. The Iranians know that if they were even to hint at using the bomb against Israel, they'd get plastered, including by the United States. Everybody knows that. It's no secret. And so you just sort of shake your head at all of this. And interestingly, and I feel a little bit sorry for Mr. Biden, he gave all this stuff to Israel, and Netanyahu and Biden, and our deputy president, Donald Trump, said, oh, Biden never did anything for Israel. I'm doing things for Israel. And here is Netanyahu nodding his head, saying, "Oh, Biden never did anything for him." If I'm saying, if I'm saying, if I'm Biden, I'm saying, wait a second, I gave you 98%. What did I have to give you? 110%? But you won't see this debated in the United States, and that's the biggest thing.
Mm.
One of the problems that's coming up right now, and I hate to say this, but Israel is in very, very deep trouble as a state.
Mm.
Very deep trouble. They're having an outmigration of people, going to other places. And unless we have a serious debate, at some point in the not distant future, Israel is going to be in a lot more difficulty than it is. And a lot of Israelis, having watched what Trump said the other day, are beside themselves. Not the right wingers who Bibi depends upon to keep from going to jail, maybe to keep his coalition together. Israel's in deep trouble.
Hmm.
The United States is in deep trouble, and the Middle East is only minor. The issue in foreign affairs we need to be getting onto is China, but the big issue is climate change. Big issue is climate change. I know very, very serious people in the business, very serious, who believe it may already be too late.
Hmm.
That children and grandchildren of today's the world will not be able to sustain a population of 10 billion people unless things are done, which it may already be too late to do.
Hmm.
So the
Yeah.
real question, if you really want to have black humor, which is going to get us first? AI in a total surveillance state,
Mm-hmm.
or climate change? Look, AI is moving in a direction which, and look at the president, Mr. Musk, doing now about access to information from the Treasury Department, Health and Human Services. They're going to know everything about you and me and everybody else, which can be used by the bad guys. And if the most serious of all my concerns about the nominees that Trump has had, okay, there's RFK Jr. and I'm an old Kennedy person, and we all know what the problems are. But the deep state, the people who actually have to keep America safe, are going to probably keep it from doing the worst things, and even the trying to dismantle NIH and the Centers for Disease Control and all of that. The appointment that most worries me is that of this man Patel, the head of the FBI, which could be giving the levers of power potentially to know everything about everybody and to do anything they want to against all of us. And at that point, the only salvation will be the Supreme Court of the United States. Listen to what the guy has said over the years. It's not, I'm not making any of it up, not making any of it up. It's all there. And of course, he's lying his way through the hearings. Okay. That's right. But that's the one that really, really bothers me. And I'm going to tell you one of those terrible things that gets said in public, which people don't realize they're doing. There was a long interview on one of the networks with one of the two candidates for Canadian Prime Minister, she holds a ministerial position now, and she was talking about all the talk about Canada, all that kind of stuff, and we love Canada, and she says the problem with Patel is there's a possibility he's going to create a secret state police. Well, I said, hold on a second. The word secret state police, and of course none of her damn business about us, you translate into German, secret state police comes out as Gemein Staatspolizei, which has an acronym, it's called Gestapo. Now, I know we're going in that direction. This is not Germany in 1933.
Right.
This is not, we are a strong society. We have enough pushback that's taking place. We still have enough institutions. We're going to have one of my great hopes for the assistant president, Mr. Trump, is that in the not distant future, he's going to get sick of being the assistant president, and he's going to defenestrate Mr. Musk, get rid of him. If only
Yeah.
he doesn't like the competition. Here you have
No, no, for sure.
here you have Musk trying to get the right wingers, essentially the pro-Nazis in Germany, to come back to power. He's the guy who's attacking the Prime Minister of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. It's on the news today. And at some point, people are going to whisper in Mr. Trump's ear, not the things he's really talking about, but do you really like being the assistant president, Mr. Trump?
Yeah.
Would you like to be the real president again? And Elon Musk doesn't care about you. He only cares about Elon Musk. And he has taken command of the high ground in the American government. It reminds me of the old cartoon that was during the Carter administration when Spig Brzezinski was doing all kinds of things with regard to the Russians. And they had this airplane, and it showed Jimmy Carter sitting in the front of the airplane with a kiddie steering wheel, and sitting behind him with Spig Brzezinski with the real controls. So at some point, Mr. Trump, assistant president, is going to want to be president, and he's going to get rid of Musk. It's just, if only for his own ego. And the sooner it happens, the better. Because right now, the reputation of the United States of America is in the deepest trouble I've seen since Vietnam, and probably the deepest trouble in my entire life, and probably in the deepest trouble since the abolition of slavery in 1865. Our reputation is in the toilet. It's not gone forever. There are a lot of things that can rescue it. We're going to have to depend upon the elected president to do something. Some members of Congress are going to begin to push back, on the Supreme Court to push back, and then people in the mainstream media having some guts to get out there and do. I think America's greatest years are ahead of it. But right now, we have a hell of a lot of work to do. And the program that you run is part of the solution, not part of the problem.
That's awesome. Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, I mean, I'm not comfortable having the richest man in the world, if that's what he is. I'm not comfortable with him running around unchecked. Like, I don't mind doing some pretty heavy looking into the books. I am not as positive about USAID as you are. I've seen them
I didn't say, wait a second. I didn't say USAID didn't need major restructuring. I didn't say that.
Yeah, okay.
But I said that the purposes matter very much to the United States.
Right.
And there are a lot of other things that really do need to be done fundamentally, many of which that Trump has talked about. And I did one thing on the thing. I don't want transgender women competing in support against other women. I just don't want that. That's unfair to the other women. And democracy is about balancing out differences of interest. That's what it's about. And it's worked since 1789, and except we had some really huge problems for which we fought the most disastrous war in our history, the Civil War, in which 600,000 people died. And then we went through a century and a half in which we still haven't gotten past the Civil War. And now I'm going to do a little sidebar thing if you have time for one thing. I went through various things about Jimmy Carter. I worked for him for 4 years, all except for 2 hours and 20 minutes. I started work 20 minutes after he was inaugurated, and I was one of the people that the Reagan people threw out of the White House before the inauguration. And I did a little research because I went to the lying-in state at the Capitol. They had a special viewing for people who work for Carter. I went to the cathedral for his funeral. I wrote documents which I put on the internet about him. because he was an outstanding person. Certainly, nobody can disagree after he was president.
Right.
And so I did a little research. Every state has in the capital of the United States 2 statues from people from their state. That is, there are 99 states because Virginia only has 1 statue. They still put another one up. So I looked up the Georgia statues. There are 2 of them. One of them was for the man who, in effect, discovered that ether was a good anesthetic. The other was one that was only put up in 1927 during the depth of racism in Georgia, in which the Ku Klux Klan was running wild. And the man is named Stevens. Who was he? He was a slaveholder. He was vice president of the Confederate States of America for 4 years. His statue is one of the 2 statues emblematic of the state of Georgia. And I think about it. Let's say that you're a Georgia school teacher and you bring a trip to Europe, to Washington, and you wander around the capital of the United States, and you get to the statue of this man representing the state of Georgia, and you have to teach your student. The kids will say, "What did he do?" Oh well, he owned slaves,
He owned slaves.
and he was a major. He was the number 2 guy in the Confederacy. And the black kids are going to say, from Georgia, he's the emblem of my state. And the white kids are going to say, having passed beyond the old days, he's representing my state. What is going on? So I'm trying to start a movement, maybe some people out there, to get him removed and a statue of Jimmy Carter put up there.
That seems
People
reasonable.
forget that Jimmy Carter, when he was a child, because of where he lived, almost all of his school boyhood friends were black. Jimmy Carter never had a racist bone in his body. After he started proposing that there be a homeland, as agreed at Camp David for the Palestinians, he got accused of being an anti-Semite.
Yeah.
If there was anybody in the Christian community who was never an anti-Semite and never anti-black, it was Jimmy Carter.
Yeah.
I knew the man. It's just so that's my thing. We've got to get that the state of Georgia needs to get that statue, that emblematic of racism and slavery, get it out of the capital of the United States. And if they don't want to put it in Jimmy Carter, you can put it in somebody else.
Let me ask you one more thing. I totally agree with all of that stuff. And I don't want to keep it for too long. Marco Rubio was approved, I would say, overwhelmingly to be Secretary of State, and we're dealing with this thing with the Panama Canal.
One, he was a senator. Nobody's going to vote against a senator.
Right, exactly. So, yeah, do you have confidence in his ability to do the job? I understand both sides of the Panama Canal thing. You know, like if Panama has violated the treaty by allowing China too much control, all right, you know, let's deal with that. But what are your thoughts on Rubio as Secretary of State?
Well, it's too early to tell. That's the old op-ed, Reuters op-ed. With regard to Panama, yeah, it needs to be freely accessible to ships of all nations. It can't be run by a foreign power, directly or indirectly, and particularly not China. There are lots of ways of working that out without ourselves breaking the treaty and sending troops and doing all that kind of stuff. And, you know, Trump says these things, then he backs away. For example, he was put on the tariffs on Canada and Mexico, then backed away for a weekend. Now he's backed away for a month. And I don't think he understood the firestorm. You got to understand, the book that guides Trump is a book called Art of the Deal.
Right.
Okay, fine. But you can do a lot of damage in the process. And we're going to have to do a lot of stuff going back on that. Now, Rubio lives in the Senate. He's been around a long time. Part of the question is who he's going to hire as the deputies and whether he's going to allow everybody who knows what they're doing in the building to be thrown out, which would be an astounding act of stupidity. And he's not that, I don't think he's stupid. Now, I'm going to tell you one positive thing about him. Uh, there is a question about would Trump want to quit NATO? Okay. I don't think so. He has pushed the NATO allies to spend more money on defense, which was actually done under Biden. But if Trump wants to claim credit for it, fine. He now says instead of 2%, it's got to be 5%. It's never going to happen. And he will compromise on that at the NATO summit that's coming up later this year. He's got to know it's never going to happen. And doesn't have to happen. But on the issue of withdrawing from NATO, which he's hinted at it sometimes, that would have to pass which would be crazy in the extreme. He'd have to pass a congressional hurdle. In 2003, there were some people who were worried if Trump got elected again, etc., he might try to withdraw from NATO. So they passed a law, signed into law, that for the United States to leave NATO, which of course in any event takes a year, it's in the treaty, original treaty, the Congress of the United States, the Senate of the United States, would have to, by the same process in which we joined NATO, vote to get out of NATO, which is a 2/3 vote of the United States Senate, which would never happen. Okay, that is in law. Okay, now there were two co-sponsors of that legislation, one Republican, one Democrat. The Republican co-sponsor of that legislation was a senator from Florida named Marco Rubio.
Right.
Okay, so when you're sitting in that building day to day and you're reading the cable traffic and you're having to face talented people and you're having to deal with other people who know what's going on, and you want to be successful, not just to help Trump, but also as Secretary of State. He might even have ambitions to want to be president. But the worst thing to do is to be a failure as Secretary of State if you want to run for president. So I have hopes for him figuring out what it's going to mean to be Secretary of State in the interests of the United States of America. And also the man who's at the Defense Department is going to have to do the same thing. What's going to happen with regard to the National Security Advisor, who's the most important person other than the president, of setting the terms and conditions of American foreign policy. And that's been true for a generation or two. The Secretary of State has been an implementer for quite some time now, rather than somebody who comes up with ideas, in part because the State Department doesn't come up with ideas. It comes up with implementation. Because we don't train Foreign Service officers to think about what the United States ought to be doing. That's a problem with the Foreign Service for some time. I'm not a Foreign Service officer.
Well, listen, this has been awesome, and it's always interesting because you know so much of the nuts and bolts and the contracts and the deals, and you've written them and you've gotten them signed, and it's always amazing to get your point of view on all of these things. And I appreciate
and
you coming on.
I have the supreme capacity to be wrong.
Well, me too.
I've been wrong I've been wrong on a couple of pretty big things in my career.
Yeah. I mean, shoot, you know, I'm so wrong so often I can't even comprehend how wrong I am half the time. And this is what made me valuable in Combat Zone was like I was always saying, am I right? Am I seeing this right? How do I test this? How do I come back and look at it from another angle? You know, oh my gosh, there's competing information here. Let me slow down. And that willingness to be wrong is what allows us to, you know, work on these big problems in a way that hopefully it's more deliberate, but it's rarely a path of least resistance. It's usually a critical path that you have to follow, and it's deliberate. And, you know, one of the things I always say, and I'm positive we've discussed this, but you can't presume to improve the condition of something you refuse to understand the condition of. And that is a crazy statement to make. One, like just think about what I just said, but then also to presume you could come in and just say, "Here's your problem, and here's your solution," and we all do that too often.
Or
So, I
solutions,
appreciate.
and then forget
Yeah.
what's best. All right, I only have two things I really hope are going to happen. Number one, that Patel is going to get defeated as president, as head of the FBI.
Okay.
That's really dangerous. Okay,
Yeah.
given what he said and what he's already done, and for President Donald Trump, sooner rather than later, to recognize to be president, he's got to get rid of Elon Musk.
Mm. Yeah. I think that's inevitable anyhow, right? Those guys can't. They're two. Those are two alphas trying to be the alpha, and that's just not going to work. One of them is going to call the other, and hopefully Donald Trump's the one that's like, "You got to go." We need Elon Musk doing other things, going to
Well, the
space and all that
role
stuff.
that Musk has assumed is probably illegal.
Yeah, well, they got to go to court for that too, right? That's one of the things about Donald Trump's push is there's going to be a lot of court cases, and there's a whole lot of reckoning to come down to see if what he is saying needs to happen can happen the way he says it needs to happen. It's that's how it works here. Got to go to court.
And the
All right, I'm going to wrap this up. Yes, go ahead.
conflict of interest facing Musk are going to do him in, even if
Oh my
the
gosh,
president doesn't do it.
hugely
Okay.
so. Yeah.
All right.
Right.
Good
Yeah,
luck
yeah,
to
yeah.
you. Thank you very much.
Okay, good night. I'll be right back to say goodbye to you officially. Everybody else, I'll see you tomorrow.